Disappearance revelation, official lie. What really happened to the Ark of the Covenant? It is the single most powerful and mysterious object in human history. A box of acacia wood overlaid with pure gold, built to house the very commandments written by the finger of God. An artifact so powerful, it leveled city walls, annihilated armies, and struck dead any man who touched it improperly. It was the centerpiece of Solomon's temple, the physical throne of God on earth. And then, it vanished. It didn't just get lost, it was erased. It disappears from the biblical record after the reign of King Josiah, around 622 BC. There is a deafening, terrifying silence. When the Babylonians, led by Nebuchadnezzar, finally tear down Jerusalem in 587 BC, the Bible meticulously lists every single treasure they looted from the temple. It lists the gold pillars, the bronze seas, the silver shovels, and the fire pans. But the one thing not on that list is the Ark of the Covenant. The official story, the one you've been told, it was probably destroyed in the fire, melted down by the Babylonians. A convenient, simple, clean explanation? But what if that's a lie? What if that story is a deliberate cover-up, designed to hide a truth so profound, so earth-shattering, that it would completely rewrite the history of power, prophecy, and the church itself? What if the Ark was never destroyed? What if it was stolen, taken in secret, and is, at this very moment, sitting intact, guarded by a solitary monk in a small, unassuming chapel in the remote mountains of Ethiopia? This is not a modern theory. This is the central, foundational belief of a 3,000-year-old faith, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, a church that claims it has been guarding the real Ark of the Covenant in the city of Aksum for nearly 3 millennia. For centuries, the Western world, Rome, the Vatican, and later, Protestant leaders dismissed this as a fable, a primitive myth. But if it's a myth, why has this story persisted? Why did the Knights Templar suddenly become obsessed with Ethiopia? And why, when you dig into the evidence, does the official story of the Ark's destruction suddenly seem like the real fantasy? To uncover this conspiracy, we must start with the one book the church tried to bury, a forbidden text that Ethiopia kept in their Bible when Rome threw it out. It is called the Kebra Nagast, or the Glory of Kings. This ancient text is the missing chapter of the Old Testament. It doesn't just suggest the Ark is in Ethiopia, it provides a detailed eyewitness account of how it got there. And it doesn't start with a war. It starts with the one story the official Bible only hints at: the forbidden love affair between the wisest man in the world, King Solomon, and the most powerful woman, the Queen of Sheba. Revelation of the forbidden lineage, the Kebra Nagast. The official Bible, in the first book of Kings, tells a short, polite, almost boring story. It says the Queen of Sheba came to test Solomon with hard questions. It says she was impressed, they exchanged gifts, and she returned to her own country. End of story. A simple diplomatic visit. This is the second great lie. It is the official story created to cover up what really happened during those months in Jerusalem. The forbidden text, the Ethiopian Kebra Nagast, the Glory of Kings, reveals the truth. And the truth is not a diplomatic meeting. It is a story of seduction, divine prophecy, and a secret pact that would change the line of the Messiah forever. The Kebra Nagast reveals the queen's true name, Makeda. She was not just a queen, she was a brilliant, powerful, and deeply spiritual ruler who had heard that a man in Israel was the wisest in the world. She came to challenge him, but she met her match. The Kebra Nagast describes their nights of philosophical debate. It describes a profound intellectual and spiritual attraction. But Solomon, in his wisdom, wanted more. He wanted an heir from this powerful woman. He made a plan. He invited her to a great feast on her final night, ordering the chefs to prepare the food with an excess of spice and salt, designed to provoke an intense thirst. After the feast, he invited her to stay in his palace. She agreed, but only after making him swear an oath. "Swear to me, by your God, that you will not take me by force." Solomon swore the oath, but he added his own condition. "I swear I will not take you," he said, "but you must swear that you will not take anything from my house by force." Makeda, believing this was easy, laughed and agreed. In the middle of the night, she awoke, her mouth burning as if with fire from the spiced food. She saw a goblet of water placed in the center of the room. Desperate, she reached out and drank. In that instant, Solomon, who had been waiting, seized her hand. "You have broken your oath," he declared. "You have taken the most valuable thing in my house, water without my permission." Makeda, trapped by her own oath and his wisdom, relented. And that night, the Kebra Nagast records, the wisest king on earth and the most powerful queen in Africa conceived a child. This is the revelation the official Bible tried to bury. Because this child was not just a royal bastard, he was Menelik I, the son of the wise man. He was the product of a forbidden union, the birth of a new, rival bloodline. The sacred lineage of King David and Solomon was no longer confined to Jerusalem. It had been planted in Africa and Ethiopia, far beyond the control of the future Roman Empire. This is the secret that the Vatican could not allow. The idea that a competing messianic line existed, an African line, was unthinkable. It undermined their entire claim to authority. But the story doesn't end there. Years later, when the boy Menelik grew into a man, he traveled back to Jerusalem to meet the father he had never known. Solomon, overjoyed, recognized his son and begged him to stay and rule Israel. But Menelik refused. His destiny was in Ethiopia. Solomon, heartbroken but proud, agreed to send his son home, but he would not send him empty-handed. He ordered the high priests of Israel to send their own firstborn sons back with Menelik to create a new royal court in Ethiopia. But the Kebra Nagast reveals that these young, bitter priests did something unthinkable. They could not bear the thought of leaving the presence of God. They decided, in a secret conspiracy, that if they were being exiled to Ethiopia, they would take God with them. Revelation of the Great Heist, the ultimate deception. How do you steal the most powerful object on earth? How do you walk into the Holy of Holies, past the high priest, and walk out with the throne of God? The official story says it's impossible, that the ark was protected by a divine power that would strike any unauthorized person dead. This is the third great lie, and the Kebra Nagast reveals it was an inside job. Remember, Solomon was not just sending his son Menelik home, he was forcing the firstborn sons of his entire priesthood to go with him to found a new Zion in Ethiopia. These young priests were furious. They were being exiled from Jerusalem, from the temple, from the only place on earth where God's presence dwelled. The Kebra Nagast identifies their leader, Azariah, the son of the high priest Zadok. Azariah, in a secret meeting, convinced his brothers that God's will had changed. He argued that God was disgusted with Solomon's idolatry, his 700 foreign wives, and his pagan temples. He claimed that God wanted to abandon Israel. And so, these young priests hatched the most audacious conspiracy in human history. They didn't just plan to steal the ark, they planned to replace it. For months, they secretly worked, using their priestly access to the temple's workshops. They built an exact, perfect forgery. A replica of the Ark of the Covenant, identical in every measurement, every carving, and every golden detail. Then, on the final night before their departure, Azariah used his authority as the high priest's son. While the city slept, he and his co-conspirators entered the Holy of Holies. This is the moment the church tried to erase. They did not burst in with weapons. They entered as priests. They performed the sacred rituals, and in a moment of profound, divine betrayal, they lifted the real ark from its resting place. And, in its place, they left the fake. They smuggled the true Ark of the Covenant out of the temple, hiding it in their caravan among the supplies destined for Ethiopia. The next day, King Solomon, with tears in his eyes, bid farewell to his son Menelik. He had no idea he was also bidding farewell to God's presence. The Kebra Nagast describes the journey home. While Menelik and his caravan traveled south, the real ark, hidden in their midst, protected them. They floated over rivers, their wagons were lifted by a mysterious wind, and they traveled faster than any army. By the time Solomon discovered the deception, it was too late. His son and the true ark were already in Ethiopia. This is the secret. The ark was not destroyed by the Babylonians 400 years later. Why? Because the Babylonians never had it. When Nebuchadnezzar's armies tore down Solomon's temple in 587 BC, they didn't melt down the Ark of the Covenant. They melted down a forgery. They destroyed a worthless replica left behind by the priests. The real ark was already safe, hidden hundreds of miles away in Africa. This revelation is so dangerous because it means the official biblical narrative is based on a lie. It means the center of God's covenant was no longer Jerusalem. It was Aksum. This is why the Western Church had to suppress the Kebra Nagast. They couldn't admit that the most sacred object in history, the object they based their entire new covenant on, was secretly resting in a nation they could not control. But this raises a new, terrifying question. If the Ark has been in Ethiopia for 3,000 years, what has happened to it? Revelation of the Solitary Guardian, the Akum Conspiracy. So, if the Ark was stolen and taken to Ethiopia, where is it now? The Western world has been obsessed with this question. It is the greatest treasure hunt in history. The Knights Templar dug under the Temple Mount looking for it. The Nazis, obsessed with occult power, hunted for it. Hollywood turned it into a blockbuster movie, a golden box that melts the faces of those who dare to open it. The entire Western world is looking in the wrong place. They are searching for a lost artifact. But the Ethiopian Church says it was never lost. It has been guarded. This is the fourth and most profound revelation, and it is the one that proves the conspiracy. If you travel to the small, remote town of Aksum in the highlands of Ethiopia, you will not find a grand cathedral. You will not find a museum. You will find a small, humble, unassuming stone building. It is the Chapel of the Tablet next to the Church of Street Mary of Zion. This chapel is, according to the Ethiopian faith, the most sacred place on earth. It is also the most secure. It is surrounded by a high iron fence. Armed guards patrol the perimeter. No politician, no king, not even the patriarch of the Ethiopian Church is allowed to enter. Because inside that chapel sits the Ark of the Covenant. And it is watched over by one man. He is known only as the Guardian. He is a monk, chosen for life by his predecessor, who is sworn to never leave the chapel grounds. He is the only human being on earth permitted to look upon the Ark. He dedicates his entire life, from the moment he is chosen until the moment he dies, to a single task, praying and burning incense before the divine object. When he dies, he secretly names his successor, who then takes his place, continuing an unbroken chain of guardianship that has lasted, they claim, for millennia. The Western world laughs at this. If it's real, they say, why won't you show it to us? Why not let scientists test it, date it, and prove it? That question reveals their ignorance, because the Ethiopians' refusal to show it is the single greatest proof that it is real. The Western Church, headquartered in Rome, treats relics as trophies. They put the alleged bones of Peter on display. They show off fragments of the alleged true cross. They display things. But the Ethiopians hide the Ark. Why? Because they know what it is. They have read the Old Testament. They know the stories the Western Church conveniently forgets. They know that when the Philistines captured the Ark, the statue of their god Dagon was found shattered, fallen on its face before it. They know that when the men of Beth Shemesh looked inside it, 70 of them were struck dead by God. And they know the story of Uzzah, the loyal servant, who, when the Ark stumbled on a cart, merely reached out his hand to steady it and was instantly killed by its power. The Ark is not a relic. It is a battery. It is a capacitor of divine, terrifying power. It is not meant to be seen or tested by scientists. It is meant to be feared and revered. The reason the Ethiopians will not show it to you is the same reason you do not show your child the core of a nuclear reactor. The secrecy is the proof. The Vatican treats its relics like museum pieces, because they are. The Ethiopians treat the Ark like a weapon of mass destruction, because it is. This ancient, unbroken tradition of the solitary guardian is the ultimate evidence. They are not hiding a myth. They are containing a power they cannot control. And this sacred duty, this guardianship, has given Ethiopia a power that has baffled historians for centuries. It is the secret to why they could never be conquered. Revelation of the unconquered nation, the curse of the Ark. Look at a map of Africa from the year 1900. It is a portrait of conquest, a continent carved up by European powers. Great Britain holds Egypt and South Africa. France controls the West. Belgium owns the Congo. Germany has its colonies. Every single nation colonized, except one, Ethiopia, a solitary island of independence surrounded by a sea of empires. Why? How did this one nation in the remote African highlands defy the combined military might of all of Europe during the scramble for Africa? Historians will give you simple, logical answers. They will say it was the mountainous terrain. They will say it was European political infighting. This is the fifth great lie. It is the official story designed to hide a terrifying supernatural truth. They didn't fail because of mountains. They failed because they were not just attacking a country. They were attacking the guardian of the Ark. The proof is written in the blood of one of Europe's greatest powers, Italy. In 1896, the modern, industrialized Kingdom of Italy decided it was time to add Ethiopia to its colonial empire. They invaded with a professional army, armed with modern rifles, cannons, and the full confidence of European superiority. They faced an Ethiopian army they considered primitive, armed with spears and old muskets. The battle was meant to be a formality. It became Europe's most humiliating defeat. At the Battle of Adwa, the Ethiopian emperor, Menelik II, named after the son of Solomon, did something the Italians could not understand. He didn't just rally his troops with a speech. He brought out the tablet, a sacred, consecrated replica of the Ark of the Covenant, which every Ethiopian church possesses. He paraded it before his army. The Ethiopian soldiers, believing they were fighting in the literal presence of God's power, became invincible. Filled with a divine fury, they did not just defeat the Italians, they annihilated them. They shattered the Italian army, captured their cannons, and sent the survivors fleeing back to the coast. A modern European army was broken by a primitive force, fighting under the banner of the Ark. The world was stunned. But the secret was kept. Decades later, in 1935, a fascist dictator named Benito Mussolini, obsessed with avenging this national shame, decided to finish the job. He invaded Ethiopia again, this time with a brutality that shocked the world: airplanes, tanks, and chemical weapons. He dropped mustard gas on villages, he bombed Red Cross hospitals, and his forces did manage to occupy the capital. But there was one thing they never found: the Ark of the Covenant. The moment the invasion began, the Ark was secretly moved from Aksum, hidden deep in the mountains, protected by the Guardians. Mussolini's occupation was a failure. The Ethiopian resistance was so fierce, so relentless, that the Italian army was bled dry. And what happened to Mussolini's glorious new Roman Empire? It was the first empire to crumble in World War II. Ethiopia was the first nation to be liberated. The Ark is not just a shield, it is a curse upon its enemies. The Philistines stole it, and their cities were ravaged by plagues. The men of Beth Shemesh looked inside it, and they were struck dead. Mussolini's fascists dared to attack its homeland, and their empire was the first to be reduced to ash. This is the power that has kept Ethiopia free. It is a divine, terrifying deterrent. This level of divine protection isn't just to guard a box, it's to guard a secret so profound that it attracted the most powerful and most mysterious organization of the Middle Ages. A group that knew the Ark wasn't in Jerusalem, a group that became obsessed with Ethiopia, the Knights Templar. Revelation of the Templar's quest, the forbidden secret. Who were the Knights Templar? The official history tells us they were poor fellow soldiers of Christ, warrior monks created to protect pilgrims on the road to Jerusalem. But this is the most romanticized lie of the Middle Ages. Think about it. This small group of 9 knights is given free rein to dig under the Temple of Solomon for 9 solid years. They are given unprecedented power by the Pope. They emerge from those tunnels not with pilgrims, but with unimaginable wealth and forbidden knowledge. They establish the world's first international banking system. They become more powerful than kings. And then, on Friday, the 13th, 1307, the King of France and the Pope conspire to have every Templar arrested, tortured, and burned at the stake. This is the official story, but it leaves one giant, unanswered question. What did they find? For centuries, everyone has assumed they were digging for the Ark of the Covenant in Jerusalem. They assumed the Templars failed, and that's why they were destroyed. This is the 6th great revelation. This is the final misdirection. The Knights Templar were not digging for the Ark in Jerusalem. They were digging for the proof of where it went. They were digging for the records of Solomon's temple. They were digging for the missing chapter, the original, uncensored story of Solomon, Sheba, and the conspiracy of the priests. The Templars were the first to uncover the Kebra Nagast. They were the first to learn that the Ark was not in Jerusalem. They were the first to learn that the entire Western Church was built on a lie, and that the true Ark was in Ethiopia. Suddenly, all their bizarre, heretical behavior makes sense. Why did this Christian order become secretly obsessed with strange foreign rituals? Why were they accused of worshiping a mysterious head, the Baphomet, which many scholars now believe was a symbol of esoteric wisdom they learned from the East? Why did their architecture suddenly change? Look at the churches of Lalibela in Ethiopia, a collection of 11 impossible churches carved down out of solid volcanic rock in the 12th century, the exact peak of the Knights Templars' power. And what is the most famous of these churches? St. George's. It is carved in the shape of a perfect Templar cross. This is not a coincidence. This is a calling card. The Templars were not just bankers. They were the secret guardians of the Kebra Nagast. Their crusades were not just about Jerusalem. They were a cover for their real mission, to establish contact with the Guardians in Aksum and gain access to the power of the true Ark. They became the most powerful organization in the world because they were the only ones in Europe who knew the real secret. And this is why they had to be destroyed. King Philip of France didn't just want their money. The Pope didn't just think they were heretics. They were destroyed because they had discovered the ultimate secret, that the divine authority of God, the Ark of the Covenant, did not reside in Rome. It was not controlled by the Pope. It was in Ethiopia, protected by an independent, unconquered African kingdom. This truth was the single greatest threat to the Vatican's power. It proved their entire claim to authority was based on a forgery left in the temple. The king and the Pope didn't just burn a few heretics. They silenced the one organization that could prove the entire Western Church was a fraud. They killed the messengers. They burned the evidence. They suppressed the Kebra Nagast. And for 700 years, the secret was safe again. Until now. Now, all the pieces are on the table. The motive, the theft, the forgery, the guardian, the unconquered nation, the Templar secret. It leads to one final, terrible conclusion. The most important question of all? We know how the church hid the truth. Now, we must ask why. Why are they still hiding it? Revelation of the final cover-up, why they are still lying. We have now laid out all the evidence. The string of pearls is complete. We have exposed the official lie of the Ark's destruction. We have revealed the forbidden lineage of Solomon and Sheba from the Kebra Nagast. We have detailed the great heist, the conspiracy of the priests who stole the real Ark and left a forgery. We have uncovered the secret of the solitary guardian in Aksum, whose secrecy is the ultimate proof. We have seen the unconquered nation, protected by the Ark's supernatural power. And we have revealed the Templar secret, the knowledge that got them burned at the stake. This leads to one final, unavoidable, and modern question. Why are they still lying? We are in the 21st century. We have the internet. The Kebra Nagast has been translated. We know about Aksum. Why does the Western Church, the Vatican, still maintain the official story that the Ark was lost or destroyed? Why not just admit it? This is the final and most dangerous revelation of all, because the answer would destroy the very foundation of the Western Church. Think, what is the entire claim of the Roman Catholic Church built upon? It is built on one single moment. The moment Jesus looked at his apostle Simon and said, "You are Peter the rock, and upon this rock I will build my church." The authority of the Pope, the authority of the entire Vatican, the claim to be the one true church, all of it rests on this one spiritual promise made to one man, Peter, in Rome. But the Ethiopian claim is not spiritual, it is physical. The Kebra Nagast reveals a rival history, a history where the physical bloodline of Solomon, Menelik, and the physical covenant of God, the Ark, did not go to Rome. It went to Ethiopia. This is the terrifying truth they are still hiding. The church in Rome is built on a metaphor, a promise to Peter. The church in Ethiopia claims to be built on the artifact, the physical Ark of God. If the Vatican were to admit that the Ark is real and has been in Ethiopia for 3,000 years, they would be admitting that their claim to authority is, at best, secondary. It would mean that while Rome was building an empire on the memory of God's covenant, Ethiopia was guarding the thing itself. It would validate the Kebra Nagast. It would validate the African lineage of Solomon. It would validate the Knights Templar. And it would prove that the Western Church, for 2,000 years, has based its power on a temple that held a forgery. It would be a spiritual apocalypse. It would be the greatest crisis of faith in human history. They cannot admit the truth, because the truth invalidates their entire claim to singular, divine authority. They must continue to call it a myth. They must continue to call the Kebra Nagast a fable. They must continue to hope that the guardian in Aksum never opens his door. Because the truth wasn't just lost, it was suppressed. It was suppressed by the church fathers who consolidated power in Rome. It was suppressed by the Pope who ordered the Templars to be burned. And it is still being suppressed today by a polite silence in our history books. But the era of silence is over. We are living in the age of awakening. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found, the Nag Hammadi Gospels were found, and the truth of the Kebra Nagast, the truth of the Ark, is now being revealed. You are not watching this by accident. Your soul, like the Templars, was searching for the truth. This knowledge is not just history. It is the restoration of a lost, sacred lineage. It proves that the official story is rarely the true story. They didn't lose the Ark, they hid it, and now you know where. If this investigation has opened your eyes, if you feel that you are ready to question the official stories, subscribe and click the notification bell because our next investigation will uncover another truth the powers that be tried to bury. And more importantly, declare your part in this awakening. Write in the comments with conviction. They can't hide it anymore. This is not just a video. It is the recovery of lost history. Thank you for seeking the truth. We will see you in the next revelation.